right. Hello, everyone, and good morning to you all. Thank you so much for joining me today for our workshop on telling your story in cover letters as part of our PhD job search prep camp for the humanities and social sciences. Just a very quick introduction. Some of you might know me. My name is Helen Foe. I'm one of the associate directors at Penn Career Services on the graduate student and postdoc team. I am joined today by my colleague, Marianne Lippa, who is also an associate director, and she will be my co-pilot for today. So admitting people throughout the session in the waiting room, and also putting a couple of things in the chat. A couple of quick logistics actually before we get to the agenda for today. I really do want to engage with all of you in the chat, so feel free to to put in your questions. Any questions that you have, feel free to put that in the chat throughout the whole workshop. We will stop and keep an eye on the chat regularly throughout the program, so please feel free to ask your questions. Okay, so for today, the topic is on cover letters. So we're going to begin with talking about what exactly a cover letter is, why should you write one, what are the goals of writing a cover letter, and then we're going to spend, I would say, the bulk of our time today talking about how do you actually prepare to write a cover letter and how do you structure a cover letter. And then we'll go on to talking about some good strategies, some strategies for good writing, and then take a look at a sample cover letter together. And we'll have a mini kind of discussion, whether it's in the chat and or also in kind of like live on camera. So I really do want to hear from all of you when we are reviewing the sample cover letter together. And then I'm going to end with talking about a couple of resources to help you as you are thinking about writing a cover letter, or if you've written one and thinking about how to revise one. I'll share some really helpful resources for all of you. Okay, so what exactly is a cover letter? So if you've been participating in some of our other workshops throughout our prep camp this week, you'll hear that cover letters have been discussed in several of our sessions so far. So just to kind of summarize what a cover letter is and what's the purpose of one, it really serves as an introduction to your job application that accompanies your resume. So it is typically a one-page letter, and so unlike most cover letters that some of you may have written for faculty positions, cover letters for jobs outside of academia usually are one page, and I would say they should be on one page because of the fact that recruiters or people who are reading your job documents don't have a lot of time, so you really want to make it a concise document for them. So along with your resume, your cover letter serves as a first impression for employers, and this is the first kind of documents that they're reading about you. It's really their first introduction to who you are, and applying for jobs through a resume and a cover letter. It's how they basically meet you, right, before they have a chance to actually speak with you, either by phone or by video or in person. So it is a first impression for employers. The cover letter summarizes who you are, why you're applying for a particular position, and what you would bring to this role. So in terms of your skills, your experiences, your qualifications, it's an opportunity for you to explain all of that, again, in a very concise way and in written form. Unlike your resume, the cover letter tells more of a narrative about who you are, and it helps to connect the dots between your past, your present, and your future. So if you're participating in the resume session before this program, you'll know that on a resume, you can summarize a lot of your experiences, really kind of include the highlights, talk about a couple of achievements, but it's really not a space for you to tell a whole story and be able to explain certain things, right? To explain how you went from one thing to another, and how all of these experiences now lead you to want to apply for this job at hand. So the cover letter is the space for you to do that. The cover letter also helps employers, along with your resume, determine whether or not they want to interview you. So that is really the purpose of the cover letter. And I'm gonna answer a couple of questions that we often get at Career Services in terms of cover letter etiquette. So one of the questions that we get often is, when should you submit a cover letter? And I would say, if you're reading a job ad and it requires and it requests a cover letter, definitely you will want to write one and to submit one. If you see on a job ad that it says that a cover letter is an optional document, we would still recommend that you go ahead and submit one. If they say that it's optional, the fact that they're even putting it on a job ad that it's an option, I would take them up on the offer, right? Because it's another opportunity to share a little bit more information about you and to tell them your story. So when should you not submit a cover letter? So we've definitely worked with students who are applying for jobs where the job ad doesn't make any mention of a cover letter. And it just says, please submit a resume. So in that case, I would say, they didn't ask for a cover letter, so you don't need to submit one. Other situations where you might not submit a cover letter is, let's say if you were, networking and you were doing informational interviews and reaching out to someone, and they kind of are serving as a referral for you, right, for a position. And if they said, they just need a resume for this job, I'm going to share it with a hiring manager, I'm going to share it with a colleague. That's a situation where you probably don't need to send a cover letter, but it doesn't hurt to ask. I think in a situation like that where things are a little bit informal, it's always fine to just clarify, right, with your networking contact, if it is appropriate for you to write a cover letter. And it's a good question to ask, especially if there might not be a job ad, right, that is posted for you to read. The other information that I think is really important to kind of incorporate as you write a cover letter has to do with tailoring. So we get asked sometimes about whether or not you need to tailor a cover letter for the different jobs that you're applying to. So even if you're applying for a role and the position is similar across different companies, you might wonder, well, do I really need to tailor it for each employer? Our answer is yes. You definitely should tailor your cover letter for each employer and role. And the reason for this is, the cover letter, again, is an opportunity for you to demonstrate like why you're a great fit for this particular job at this particular company. If you have a more generic cover letter, you're just not going to be able to make as strong of a case for your candidacy in the job search. So we always recommend tailoring and incorporating that information, right, as you write that letter. A couple of other things about cover letters and etiquette as it applies to cover letters is talking about kind of the tone, right? What is the tone that you might want to aim for when you write this letter? We would say that the tone should be professional, it should be positive, it should be confident, right? So again, if some of you have participated in some of our previous prep camp programs earlier this week, you'll hear that kind of echoed by the recruiters, by other employers who say that that's the kind of tone that they would like to hear, right, when they're looking at cover letters. Along those lines, the voice of your cover letter should match that of the resume. So this might be a little bit harder to explain, like what exactly is the voice? I would think of it in terms of a couple of things. So lots of different factors, the content of what you write, how you write it, the styling, the formatting of your document, all of it kind of contributes to what is the feeling that you want a reader to take away, right? What's the feeling that you want them to have when they're done reading this letter, right? What do they want? What do you want them to think of you? Do you want them to think of you as someone who is results oriented, someone who is kind, someone who's generous, someone who's collegial, right? Think of what it is that you want, how you want the reader to feel, right, after they read this cover letter. Another thing that I would emphasize is in terms of writing a cover letter, always try to focus on the pull of the job as opposed to the push away from something else, right? So in some of the cover letters that I've read from PhD candidates, sometimes there's a line in there that says something like, because of the faculty job market, and just being not interested in faculty positions, I am now very excited to do XYZ. So that's an example of kind of showing that it's more about kind of the push away from something as opposed to the pull and the attraction of a job, right? So kind of going along with the issue of tone that I was talking about earlier, it's always good to talk about, why is this unique opportunity so appealing to you, right? And to talk about that especially at the beginning of a cover letter, which we'll talk more in detail about in terms of structuring your letter. Similarly, there's no need to over-explain certain situations. So kind of going back to this example of, let's say if you were pivoting from applying to mostly, faculty positions, and now you're looking at jobs outside of academia in a particular industry, you really don't have to explain, how you have been on the faculty job market for a couple of years and it prevented you from doing XYZ, and now you're looking at this other thing. So no need to over explain certain situations. That can be addressed in an interview if it comes, if it's a question that they're interested in, it will likely come out through an interview and you can talk about it, right? And then the other thing that's important to keep in mind with a cover letter is that it's a space where you don't want to kind of use the real estate on that page to reiterate and repeat everything that's already on your resume. You want your cover letter to complement what's on the resume, right? Maybe picking out a couple of bullet points and expanding on them, telling a story around those bullet points in your cover letter, but not repeating them verbatim, right? And I've definitely seen bullet points that are copied and pasted from the cover letter to a resume and vice versa. And employers, recruiters, anyone who's reading it, they can usually spot that, right? If it's something that's verbatim, that's kind of just lifted and copied and pasted. So that's something that I would recommend not doing. Cover letter etiquette in terms of explaining certain things, I would recommend kind of doing so in a positive way. So again, there's no need to, I think, address something that you feel like is a deficiency or something that you're lacking or there's a gap. You can talk about things in a more positive way. So I can think of a couple of examples where someone might write in a cover letter, while I don't have experience in X, Y, and Z, XYZ, right? I think the issue with kind of framing it that way is that it's already the framing of that in terms of the although or despite or while I don't have this, it already kind of creates kind of like a negative kind of connotation, right? So I think a more positive way of kind of saying that you are able to bring something else, right? Even though you don't have something that they're looking for in a job ad, is to just say, with this experience in XYZ, I would be eager, I would be excited, I would be able to hit the ground running doing X, Y, and Z and applying the skill set to to learn this other tool, right? So something along those lines is a more positive way of addressing some of these things that you might not have when you're applying for a job. So I want to stop. I don't see anything in the chat so far, but I want to stop just briefly and see if there are any questions about kind of cover letter etiquette so far before we kind of dive into a little bit more of what employers are looking at, and also the formatting and structure of a cover letter. Any questions so far? So I'm going to keep going, but feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll continue to monitor what's in there. Okay, so thinking from the employer and the recruiter's point of view, it's very likely if you're applying for a position that at an organization that uses an applicant tracking system, which for those of you who might not be familiar with that, it's just a software program that employers, especially large employers, use to help them kind of manage the volume of applicants that they get for the different jobs that they're advertising for. And with that software, a lot of it involves scanning for keywords to help them kind of winnow down a large pool of applicants into a more manageable tool. So it's very likely that your cover letter will go through an applicant tracking system and scan for keywords. And kind of once it makes it past that stage, you will get to a human, right? A human who will be able to read your documents, both the resume and the cover letter. I would say that many recruiters will read your resume first before the cover letter. And the reasoning for that is that the resume gives them a pretty quick way to kind of assess if you have the qualifications to do the job. So a good resume will kind of help them make that decision. And then afterwards, they will read the cover letter and kind of get a little bit more about who you are and learn a little bit more about your story and how your skills and experiences will kind of translate, right, for the role that they're advertising for. So all of this, keeping in mind that for those of you, again, who were at the recruiter and hiring manager panel yesterday, you'll know that these documents are looked at very quickly, sometimes 10 seconds, sometimes 45 seconds if they have time, and sometimes more if they have time and if they want to. But a lot of these documents are read and skimmed very quickly. So your cover letter should be short and it can be concise. So I see a couple of questions. I see a question about addressing cover letters. Perfect. And yes, okay. So good questions. I'm actually going to get to that, I think, in like 2 slides or so. So keep the questions coming. Happy to answer them throughout the session. Okay, so going back to the goals, just kind of stepping back just a little bit more, thinking about the goals of a cover letter. So along with the resume, the goal of this document, along with the other document, the resume, is to get you to the next stage of the job search process, which is the interview. So, the resume and the cover letter alone, they will not get you the job, but it should hopefully get you to that next stage, which is the interview. So, your goal in writing a cover letter is to tell your story, is to talk about the skills you have, your experiences, your qualifications, how you would contribute to this role at this particular organization, and how you would be a good fit, right, for this organization. You want to show a little bit of your voice. I was talking about voice earlier, your personality, your characteristics. It's always great to be able to convey enthusiasm, excitement, strong interest in this job. You basically want the person reading your cover letter to think, wow, this person really wants the job and is really qualified for it. The cover letter is also an opportunity to communicate, right? For you to communicate and for you to demonstrate that ability to communicate through writing, right? So, even though your job might not be a ton of writing, think of the cover letter as another kind of piece of evidence of your ability to communicate, which is generally a skill set that is valued by employers, no matter what the position is. And I think, especially for PhDs in the humanities and social sciences, your ability to communicate is one of the most important skills and the most valuable skills that you bring to any employer. So you'll want to take advantage of this document as a way to demonstrate, right, how well you can communicate. Another goal of this cover letter is also to be able to demonstrate that you understand what the job entails and that you understand what this job means that you have to do. Because, I think the last thing that employers want is to hire someone who has no idea kind of what they're getting themselves into, when they begin a new job. So you want to show them that you get what this job includes doing, you understand the responsibilities, you understand how this role kind of fits into the rest of the organization. So those are some of the mini goals that you'll want to keep in mind as you write this cover letter, right, with the bigger goal of getting to the next round, which is the interview. So preparing to write a cover letter, a couple of things to do that some of them you're already going to do as you're preparing to write your resume, right? So number one, definitely read and understand the job ad. So you will want to be able to go back and revisit the job ad kind of throughout this process of applying for jobs, but especially at the early stages when you're working on the resume and the cover letter. Just reading it a couple of times, knowing pretty well like what the job entails. After that, you'll also want to research the employer. So if this is an employer that you don't know very much about, do some research, whether it's kind of looking at their website, checking them out on LinkedIn, all of their social media, platforms, looking at other things that they've maybe been in the news for, if they won an award for a project or if they've been recognized for something. You'll want to know as much as possible about the employer. This is also where networking comes in. So when you're reaching out to, let's say, Penn alums or other people in your network to learn more about careers, it's also a great opportunity to learn more about the employer, especially if you think it might be one that you'll want to work at one day. So after that, definitely recommend, I would say, draft and review your resume and work on that resume first before kind of diving in to the cover letter, because the cover letter is going to draw on some of the things that you'll write on the resume. And again, you want it to match in terms of voice and tone. And you want the reader to see that, with both documents that they're reading, that this is the same person, right? So definitely, work on that resume for the job. Be able to articulate why you're interested in this position, in this job itself. Those are things that, I think I would think of it kind of in terms of pre-writing for a cover letter, having some time to just jot down, on paper or, typing a couple of things out just to articulate for yourself, why is it that you want this job, right? Because knowing the answer to that question is going to help you write that letter. Identify the skills that you have that match what they're looking for. So again, kind of going through the job ad, thinking about yourself, reflecting on your own skills, and then kind of identifying what those skills are, and then choosing some examples to illustrate those skills in action, right? So this is where having that resume ready before you write a cover letter can be really helpful, so that you can kind of look at, here are the different sections of my resume, and here are the things that I want to point out and draw out to explain my story. Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about structuring the cover letter. So I'm gonna get to two of the comments in the chat. So one of the questions is about how to address cover letters, right? Mr. and Mrs. Doctor, to whom it may concern, full name. So this is a really good question. In general, I would say that you should address the cover letter to a hiring manager if possible. If there is a name that is included in the job ad, definitely address it to that person. If you have identified, if you have someone's full name, you can, if they have a PhD, for example, you can call them Dr. So-and-so. You'll want to, look at how they are, how they prefer to be called, right? So sometimes, you'll want to check them out and just see what's their bio, on the company or organization webpage. You might check them out on LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn has a place now, for those of you who might not know, for preferred pronouns, right? So you can use some of that information to help you figure out, like, what is the right way to address someone. Let's say if you have their full name, you can use that information to help you figure out, like, how to best address them. If you don't have a name, and you cannot figure out, like, so sometimes in a job ad they might say, this role reports to the director of XYZ. So even if it doesn't have that person's name, you might be able to just find that, right, through your research online. And in a situation like that, you can use the name. But sometimes, a hiring decision is more than just, the person that you're reporting to. So you can say something like, dear so-and-so and hiring committee, or dear so-and-so and search committee. If you have absolutely no idea whom the letter should be addressed to, definitely we would recommend not saying to whom it may concern. It sounds a little bit too, I would say it's not, it's almost, to whom it may concern almost seems like it's just like addressing it to anyone who will read this, right? And that's not exactly the tone that you want to go for. So in a situation like that, with no name, no information, I think you're pretty safe to just say, dear hiring manager, dear, XYZ search committee, right? Dear, let's communications team search committee, or something like that, right? That can suffice if you've done your due diligence and you can't find who you should address it to. So I hope that addresses the question there. Feel free to ask a follow-up. Okay, and then so the first paragraph. So after kind of the salutation at the beginning, you've got your first paragraph, and I would say the first paragraph is pretty important, because it comes first, and it's really, again, going back to that first idea of the first impression. It's what the reader's going to read first, right? So you want to make good use of this first paragraph. So in terms of a general structure, introduce who you are, what you're applying for, and why you're a good fit for the job at hand. And I'm going to go into more details with each of these different paragraphs. So that's the purpose of the first paragraph. The body paragraphs in the middle, that's where you can expand on your resume to really tell a story, right? To kind of connect the dots, to talk about those skills that you bring to this role, using specific examples of your past achievements. And then that last paragraph summarizes your qualifications and interest in the role. You express your gratitude, and what you're looking forward to in the next step. So that's kind of like an overview of the structure. And I'm going to go into more detail for each of these different paragraphs. So with the intro paragraph, I always recommend answering at least 3 questions. So keeping in mind, again, that the cover letter is short, right? So you want to make, you want to make good use of the space that you have. That first paragraph should answer some basic questions. Who are you? What are you applying for? And what skills do you bring to this job and organization? And I often say, that last sentence that that last kind of paragraph, last part of paragraph where you answer the skills question and what do you bring, can be used as kind of like a thesis statement, right, for a whole letter. So it's something that you want to keep in mind, that the rest of the cover letter is going to kind of elaborate on, and is trying to, like, prove. So if you say at the end of that first introductory paragraph that you're excited to bring X, Y, or A, B, and C to this position, you can then use A, B, and C to structure the rest of your body paragraphs. So I'm going to give an example to kind of show, how you can kind of write an introductory paragraph, right? Answering those questions. So I'm going to read it out loud. Feel free to read it on your own as well. So here's an example. I'm excited to apply for the role of X at Y organization. Currently a PhD candidate in history at the University of Pennsylvania, I have always been interested in finding creative ways to convey complex ideas to broad audiences. As an avid researcher and communicator, I'm eager to bring my experiences writing for academic and general populations, my skill sets in using different social media platforms to share research findings, and my strong familiarity using data visualization tools to the role of X that you're applying for. So this is an example of how you can answer those questions in basically 3 sentences, right? So it can be pretty succinct, but it's also kind of conveying a little bit about who you are, the word excited, right? You're trying to show your excitement for the role. You say a little bit about who you are, right? You're a PhD candidate in history at Penn, and something about what you do and what you're interested in, right? So that part about being always interested in finding creative ways to share complex ideas with broad audiences. You also give a little bit of a descriptor as an avid researcher and communicator. And then that last part of that third sentence addresses, like, here are the 3 things that I'm going to elaborate on in the rest of this cover letter. So the good thing about answering these questions in that first paragraph is that, even if someone decides that they're going to stop reading the rest of your cover letter, that first paragraph answers these basic questions, and it gives them something to take away from this document, right? Because again, people who are in recruiting, people in HR, they might not have a ton of time to spend on your documents, but with a good first paragraph, they'll know exactly who you are, what are you applying for, and what do you contribute? What are you going to bring to this role if we were to hire you? So yeah, any questions about this example? So I see a question in the chat that I'm going to address kind of throughout. It's a very good question. So the question is, when making a career pivot, what are some ways to tell the story without over detailing it? Is giving a short anecdote okay if it illustrates what you're drawn to and excited about more than what you're moving on from? So absolutely. I think it's a important thing to do to you do want to tell that story, right? So giving examples of what you have done in the past that connects, things that you're passionate about, all of those are good things to do because you want to illustrate the enthusiasm, even if you may not have, let's say, direct experience, right? Because you're making that pivot. I'm going to address the storytelling without over detailing part in the examples that I'm going to give, but feel free, if I'm not answering it, to the full extent that you're hoping, feel free to ask a follow-up. Happy to go through that again. So there's another question. Might the "I'm excited to apply for the X role" opening begin to seem too generic? Is there an argument to be made for a more creative hook and opening for a sentence? Absolutely, yeah. So I think, there's a couple of ways to look at this. So what I'll say is there's no one way to write an effective and strong cover letter. The structure is what I'm outlining, but there are different ways to approach this, right? So I think that, for some employers, they really want concise and to the point. So if you say, "I'm excited to apply for the role of XYZ," that answers the question in like 10 words, right? In fewer than 10 words. If you want to start with a more kind of creative hook and a first sentence, that works as well too. My only caution is to not tell too long of a story in that first paragraph, right? Because it then kind of pushes everything down, and they're not able to kind of get to that, thesis statement in a short amount of time. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely a more creative hook works. But just not to tell too long of a story, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's see. I think I may have skipped a slide. Okay, so going on to the body paragraphs, which again, please feel free to keep the questions coming. So going back to the body paragraph. So after you've established this intro and you have this thesis statement, you can then use the A, B, and C to kind of guide you in the rest of this letter. So much like writing, in academic terms, in a way, there's a big difference between academic writing and writing a cover letter, but there are some similarities in terms of just the structure, right? And how do you want to assemble a paragraph to be effective? So topic sentences, are important, much as as much as they are when you're writing an academic paragraph, right, for a dissertation. Having a strong topic sentence is also a good thing because it signals to the reader what the rest of the paragraph is going to be about. So again, thinking about the skimming part, sometimes people want to skim, and if you have a good topic sentence for a paragraph, it's going to be a lot easier for them to to skim and know exactly what you're going to be focused on. So what you can do with those skill sets that you're articulating is to then kind of break them down and have a separate paragraph devoted to each one. So let's say you want to focus your first body paragraph on skill A. Start with a good topic sentence. After that, you want to give, I would say, 1 to 2 examples of how you've used that skill and what the results were. So this is a spot for you to tell your story. But again, caution to be concise. And this is something that you're going to go through some trial and error to figure out. And so having other people read your cover letter is good so that they can give you feedback on whether your story makes sense or not. We're happy to do that at Career Services, and I'll talk about ways that you can make an appointment with us and what we can do. So telling a story and then giving some specifics, right? And sharing some of the results if you have them is really powerful in a short cover letter. And I'm going to illustrate that in my next slide with some examples. So after you give those examples, let's say 1 or 2 examples, you can then connect those examples to exactly how you'll be able to bring value or contribute to this role and organization using that particular skill. So this is also a good place for you to demonstrate that you understand the job, right? Here's what I've done in the past, and here's what it means that I can do using this, and this to do this for your organization. So again, this is where I think the job ad comes in. If that's kind of like the main source of information that you have about the role, if you have other insights into what the job entails from, let's say, networking, that would be great to kind of incorporate, right? But basically, the point of this last part here is to show the employers that, and to make it very explicit for them. Here's what I've done, even though it might not be exactly what you're looking for. Here's how I can directly translate that, and here's how that skill is transferable to this role that I'm applying to, right? So you're not making them guess what it is that it means you can do for them. You're making it very explicit for them. So that's the structure that we would recommend for a body paragraph. After that, you can repeat those same steps for the other paragraphs that you're doing, for skill B and skill C if you have a third one, right, that you want to mention in your cover letter. Okay, so I'm going to give an example here of a body paragraph that you could write. As with any piece of writing, no writing is ever perfect, but it kind of illustrates the structure of what I'm talking about here. Okay, so I'm going to read it out loud. Feel free to read it on your own as well. So throughout my career, I've produced different content and deliverables, including blog posts, scholarly papers, short videos, and policy reports to explain important concepts at a level tailored to the audience. As a doctoral student, I've enjoyed sharing my research on XYZ with the broader public through short blog posts and appearances as a guest on several podcasts. In my prior role working at this other place, my proudest accomplishment was devising a series of 12 short videos on the history of X for high school students, which garnered over 50,000 views since 2017. These experiences of tailoring messages for unique audiences of all backgrounds equip me well to oversee the content development of XYZ using different multimedia tools, and you could say at this organization. So this is just kind of illustrating the structure, right? So the first sentence is basically the topic sentence, right? I'm going to talk about being able to explain important concepts and tailor that to an audience, right? That's the skill set I'm going for. I'm going to give two examples. One is being a doctoral student. Here's how I engage with different audiences on my research. And then after that, it's another example of how in my other role doing this other thing, I took great pride in producing these short videos on this subject, and it's gotten over 50,000 views, right, in the last couple of years. So these are just some quick examples that you're showing, and then you're kind of tying it back at the end, right? Kind of reiterating that, you know, I can tailor, I can customize, I can understand my audience, and I can deliver content, right, for whomever I have to connect with. So that's kind of the goal of this paragraph. Any questions on the body paragraph structure, this example? So I'm going to keep going, but feel free to put more questions into the chat. Okay, the concluding paragraph. So this is one where sometimes people kind of struggle because you might wonder, like, oh, am I just going to repeat everything I've said? What do I write that's something new? So with the concluding paragraph, you want to use it as an opportunity to just summarize. So you know, going back to how people skim a document, it might be that maybe they read the first paragraph, they read the last paragraph, they read your topic sentences. It's much like how you would skim when you're doing academic reading, right? So the concluding paragraph is an opportunity to just summarize, right? Summarize why you are uniquely qualified to thrive and be very successful in this role. You want to also use this space to share, to reiterate why you're a good fit for them, why you'd love to bring your skills to this role. And then if you have other insights into this organization, this is a good place to kind of include that information. So if you talked to someone, if you know this organization really well, because maybe you've worked with them in the past, or maybe you interact with them during your research, right, as a doctoral student, it's all good information to share. And then you want to end your cover letter with just gratitude, right? Thanking the reader, and then being explicit about what next steps you're looking forward to. And usually that's an interview. So here's an example of what that concluding paragraph can look like. Again, not perfect, but just to show you what the structure can look like. So I'll read it out loud. You can read it on your own. As someone who loves understanding the populations I work with to better connect with them through my writing and content development, I would thrive applying my diverse skill sets in X, Y, and Z to help support the organization's mission in XYZ. I have long followed this organization's work since my first role working at this other place, and speaking with this person and that person at the organization has made me even more excited about the prospect of joining the team. I look forward to an opportunity to further share how I can bring value to this position. Thank you for your consideration. So at the end, you could say, I look forward to an opportunity, for a conversation or for an interview to further share how I can bring value to this position. But the goal is to just be very clear, like what do you want next? Sometimes people, wonder if it's appropriate to follow up with them. I think there's a lot of different factors to keep in mind with that. Typically, I would say if you let's say know someone, if you've already spoken to someone at the organization, it's probably okay to check in more informally. Um, but you probably don't want to say, I will follow up and make a phone call in a week, right? Because some of these hiring processes, they take longer. But it also really depends on the industry and the organization. Um, so I would kind of emphasize more in terms of what you're looking for as opposed to, I'm going to call you every week about this, right? That's not, again, that's kind of not the vibe that you want to go for in kind of representing, right, yourself professionally. Any questions on these sample paragraphs, on like the concluding paragraph um, to end a cover letter? Okay. So we are going to talk a little bit about strategies of good writing in general that I think apply for cover letters. Um, and yeah, so I've mentioned throughout just the importance of being clear, being concise. To that end, every sentence should count in your cover letter. And I would say that sometimes when you're writing a cover letter, it's better to if you have more to say, to just have a longer cover letter and then edit it down, right? And that's something that, we're very happy to work with you on at Career Services. Um, if you're finding that it's hard to be concise to begin with, it's okay to write a longer letter and then just find ways to edit and to be more concise later. Um, Another kind of piece of advice for good writing is alter the sentence structure and length. And that goes along with the third bullet point that I have on there, which is to not start every sentence with I. I think sometimes it could be really easy to kind of start a sentence and say, I did this, I did that, I did that. And as the reader, as someone who's read a lot of cover letters, sometimes it gets a little bit tedious, right, to read a sentence that's always beginning with I. So definitely, change it up a little bit. You might have some long sentences, you might have some short sentences. Just write it in a way that is engaging, right? So that the reader will stay engaged throughout. Another piece of good writing, I'm sure all of you know this, is show not tell. And I think this is a little bit hard, especially when you don't have a lot of space to work with on a cover letter. But one example I can give you is on a cover letter, instead of saying things like, I am, detail oriented, I am organized, I am motivated, right? So a lot of those like I am phrases are more of the telling part, right? That it's better going back to some of my examples, to just say, to tell a story and to show, right? So if you want to say that you are detail oriented and you really enjoy like editing, right? Maybe dropping in somewhere that, if you, let's say if you have an experience where you are like the go-to person for editing, and because of how detail oriented you are, you could say that, for example, when I was volunteering at this organization, I was happy to be the go-to person for editing like all proposals or all documents related to blah blah blah. Because of my strong attention to detail, right? So that's like a better way of saying, I'm detail oriented. So I know that takes more words to say that than just using the adjective, and but it is more effective in being able to tell that story. Um, Another thing that I would recommend, and this is like a higher level, like a next level up in terms of good cover letter writing, is to try to use verbs as you tell your story that also convey energy and excitement and passion in your past examples, right? So you may have noticed in the sample paragraphs that I talked about, words like enjoy, right? So I enjoyed organizing. One of my proudest accomplishments in this role was. So these are just little things that you can do to try to tell more of that story, and also kind of alter sometimes it's easy to slide into I did this, I did that, right? So this is also another way to kind of alter your writing and the sentence structure and the lengths so that you can have a more engaging paragraph to read, right, for the reader. So yeah, so the most fulfilling part of doing XYZ was this. I mean, I think that says a lot, right? When you talk about what was fulfilling in your work, it shows that you're passionate. It shows me that you care, right, about your work. So that's like another example. So with a cover letter, it's good to make sure that it all flows well, right? And I like to emphasize having strong transition sentences between paragraphs to help with the flow. So your topic sentences can also function as transition sentences to help kind of like connect each of the skills, right? And you can find kind of different ways of doing that. To kind of connect those skills together so it tells a coherent story. And then finally, proofread. Just really important to not just run the spell check on this document, but to make sure that everything flows, everything's logical, you're not missing a word when you're writing, because again, a cover letter is it serves as a writing sample, right? You may or may not be asked for a writing sample in a job, but the cover letter itself is a sample of your writing, right? So you want to show them that, if you are someone who pays attention to detail, then you'll want to make sure that this cover letter, is proofread, right? And, and is written well. Any questions about these strategies? I know that, many of you are familiar with this already. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about formatting. So advice for formatting. So in terms of cover letter length, should be 1 page at most, because people want to be able to read this quickly and skim it quickly. The formatting of it should match the resume. So, when I was talking earlier about like the voice and having these documents kind of present the same person, the formatting should match. So, you don't want, let's say, 0.3 margins on the resume, but also have like 1.25 margins on your cover letter, right? So margins, the font size, you don't want one font to be way bigger than the other. So all of that should match, right? So that it's kind of presenting the same person. Saving it as a PDF is a good idea if you're uploading it to to a job application online that uses an applicant tracking system. Always good to use PDF over a Word doc. The PDF just preserves the formatting, and it's easier, I think, for people to share, and that way you'll be certain that none of it gets altered, right? And you'll also want to title the document in a way that also matches how you title the resume. So if it's name, role, cover letter, that should match name, role, resume, right? For how you save the document as. If you're applying by email, right? For anyone applying for a job at a smaller organization where, let's say they're not using an applicant tracking system and they are mostly, it's just emailing someone. The good thing is you have someone's name. And if it's just sending a resume and a cover letter by email, I think it's good to generally attach those documents, right? So if you're attaching a resume, you can also attach the cover letter, because those things could very likely be shared, right? It might be that they want to forward those documents to other people involved in the hiring process. So I would say that that's often better than just copying and pasting the entire cover letter into a text. But in a situation like that, you can just use the email to quickly introduce yourself, what you're applying for, what you've attached, and maybe a sentence or two and why you're excited about the job and how you would contribute to it. So not copying and pasting the cover letter, but just a short paragraph indicating that you are applying for a role. Okay, so we are going to look at a sample cover letter. And so Marianne, if you're able to drop the link for the sample cover letter, that would be awesome. So we're going to look at a sample cover letter from Imagine PhD, which I hope most of you know about. It's an excellent career exploration and planning tool for PhDs in the humanities and social sciences. So this is a cover letter in the writing, publishing, and editing job family that's there. So they have a lot of different job families. I think there's 15 of them. And writing, publishing, and editing is one of the industries that many PhDs in the humanities and social sciences look into. So there's a lot more information on Imagine PhD, but for today, we're going to look at this letter that Marianne had shared the link to in the chat. So the role itself, so just to give you all some context, as you're reading the cover letter, the role itself is a manager of communications position at a place called Cure Search for Children's Cancer. So it's a national nonprofit. And so I just quickly summarized the job on this slide. Imagine PhD has a lot more on the job ad, but for the in the spirit of kind of summarizing things for all of you so that we could get to the cover letter, I've just kind of copied and pasted the most important parts of this of the job ad. So the primary responsibility is to conceptualize, organize, plan, produce, and execute content to expand on Cure Search's footprint, both digital and print, awareness, subscribers, and donor. Candidates must have a knack and a love for writing and an appreciation for the importance of graphics and video to engage audiences. This role requires a high level of creativity, ability to work independently and with many stakeholders, attention to detail, organization, and project management skills. So I hope that some of this resonates with all of you as you're thinking about the skills that you have as PhDs in the humanities and social sciences. So that is what the job is, and that's what the cover letter is tailored to. So I want to give everyone maybe like a minute to read the cover letter that's shared. Everyone kind of reads a piece of writing with different perspectives. So I think all of the feedback that you all have is great because everyone comes at these documents from different perspectives. So this is terrific. So I know that some of you have already answered the questions on the slide. Are there things that stand out to you? Like if there's one thing that stands out from reading this cover letter, if it's like an overall impression that you get, or if it's like one specific example that stands out, like is there anything that stands out to you when you read this cover letter? So there's a comment about kind of wishing that the cover letter was broken into different paragraphs to make it easier to skim, which I think that's one of the things that I noticed when I first read this cover letter was that there's basically 2 giant paragraphs and one kind of last sentence, right? So it's a little bit bulky, and the comment about kind of making this harder to skim, like absolutely, I think it is a little bit harder to skim, right, when you have a giant block of text. And Jacob also says, I also appreciate the clear results listed. Social media account followers doubled. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I think that part of the cover letter where this person, Jane, this person talked about, how she created and edited content, and also in the process, like doubled social media followers on Facebook. That's a great specific, example of results that she achieved. Yeah, so someone else had said that the first paragraph was more like a body paragraph than the proper introduction. Agree with that. I think it's kind of blending the intro and the body paragraph together. Let's see, other comments. The second to last sentence was like telling. And I wonder if they could instead work some of those traits into their examples to do more showing instead. Yeah. I think Julie was talking about the end of that second paragraph, right? And I would say what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8 lines down in that second paragraph where it says, I am organized, detail-oriented, have strong time management skills, and have experience working both independently and with multiple stakeholders. Yeah, I think that's a really good example of like a telling sentence, right? Kind of the I am adjective, is a lot of telling. I think she does a little bit of this in her examples, but I think that Jane could probably kind of incorporate a little bit more examples to show us that she is organized, right? As she tells her stories in that first big paragraph. Samantha says most sentences have a clear purpose and combine what the applicant wants to do with what they have already done, what they're already doing or have already done. Yes, that's a really great point about this cover letter. I think that this person, has made kind of every sentence count in a way, even though there are some improvements that could be made, but they do tie it in to very specific things that that the job requires at CureSearch, and giving very specific examples of different kinds of communication platforms and different ways of just communicating with people. So absolutely. There's a comment on here about a lot of many sentences starting with I. Yeah, I see that. I see that. I think that's also another area, right, that that can be improved on. It's just altering the sentence length and just changing up the structure of the sentences so that not every sentence starts with an I. Yes, Miriam says, I could see how there might be differing opinions on this, but I appreciate the way this applicant was able to thread personal and family experience in to give the hiring committee a sense of why and how Jane is invested in the potential role. To me, they did this with a tone that indicated motivation rather than making it come across as gratuitous oversharing. Yeah, I love that comment. Thank you so much, Miriam, for making that comment. So that is a part of this cover letter that I think adds another dimension to it and shares a little bit more about her motivations, right? Is that she has a more kind of personal motivation for wanting this role, and and that's something that I think employers do kind of value knowing, right? Like if you have particularly since this is a role at CureSearch for children's cancer, I think that and along with most organizations, like you want to hire someone who believes in your mission, who cares about the work, right? And so that is a way of demonstrating that that this is a role that would be really meaningful to her, or them. I like how Jane translated teaching experience and a certificate in digital humanities into skills that relate to the job. Yeah. So I think that's a really excellent point on on kind of directly translating, right, that doctoral experience, digital humanities, and kind of conveying it very clearly for the employer that this is what I will be able to do, and this prepares me well to do this. So that's another great point. And these are all great comments. So I think Imagine PhD has a lot of examples like this, and as you all can see just from this one example, there's a lot of cover letters in there, and everyone's going to have different opinions and different kind of feedback, right? So at the end of the day, when you're working on your own, it's helpful to get feedback from some people. It can be overwhelming to send it to too many people, right? And to get too many differing opinions, right? If people disagree with each other. But I do think some of that is very valuable. And at the end of the day, it's a document that you want to kind of as accurately as possible capture what it is that you want to bring and how you want to present yourself, right, to an employer when you're giving them this first impression. So just to, a couple of things to wrap things up. So resources to help with cover letter writing. And Marianne, thank you for sharing all of those in the chat. So there are a couple of resources that I would point you all to just to learn more about cover letter writing. So Big Interview is the first resource. So it is primarily a tool that is going to be very useful for practicing interviews, which we will talk about tomorrow on the last day of our prep camp. But there is a part on this resource that's part of the resume curriculum that talks about writing persuasive cover letters. So I definitely recommend tuning into it. I want to say it's about 12 minutes long, so not long at all. Uh, Going back to talking about Imagine PhD, there are so many annotated sample cover letters for each of the job families that you can all take a look at. And there are job ads that accompany, along with the resume, that kind of accompany the whole package for each of the job families. So definitely, check them all out. And you can select the job families that you're most interested in to read the types of cover letters that would be most relevant to you. We have a cover letter writing guide on the Career Services page, and so you can feel free to kind of go to that and kind of reference back to it. When you're writing your own letter. I really like a lot of the cover letter writing advice that is from the Muse, which is a good resource for career advice in general. I would say it's kind of more aimed towards the millennial crowd, but they have some really good advice that's really available to people. So I've included the link there. And then finally, I wanted to plug, our office. Especially our team, the grad student and postdoc team at Career Services. And we are very happy to work with all of you in reading over cover letters, giving you feedback, reading through every sentence and kind of talking you through it. We can also help kind of brainstorm with you. If you see a job ad and you're not quite ready to write a draft of a cover letter, we can help you brainstorm in that part of the process before you start writing. So feel free to make an appointment with us at Career Services. We are happy to meet with you all.